Today we are on BiggerPockets YouTube channels and we are going to discuss rooming houses. We're going to talk about the pros, the cons, and we're going to take you through our 40-unit rooming house that we just completed in Seattle, Washington.
Only problem, I bought it from a fake seller.
James Dainard just walked over to my desk.
If you skip the first 3 steps, that's the easiest way to lose money. So what is a rooming house? A rooming house is when you take a property and you rent out rooms individually to individual tenants. This can mean that you can have anywhere between 6 and 8 tenants in one specific rooming house. So 6 to 8 tenants in one specific house, can't that be a nightmare? It can be. It is a lot of work, so you want to make sure that the return is worth it. The reason that we have purchased so many different types of rooming houses in the city of Seattle is because it allows us to maximize the price per square rentable foot. When we're renting rooms out for roughly about $1,000 a room, and the rooms are only about 120 square feet, that gets us about $10 per square foot on a rentable income. On our traditional apartment buildings, we might only get about $3 per rentable square foot. So it allows you to maximize an individual property by putting the right lease plan together. So if I can rent my property for 3 times more per square foot on a rooming house than an apartment building, why wouldn't I only buy rooming houses? Well, there's some key things you need to look at before purchasing that next rooming house. The first one is, what's the zoning on the property? Does the city allow for you to run a rooming house in that specific location? Also, what does your city allow you to have as a maximum room count or maximum tenant count per single family property? What's the renovation plan? What's your maximal rentable square footage? How big is the property? I might be looking at a 4-bedroom house that I want to turn it into a rooming house, and I want to get 6 to 8 bedrooms in it, but it might only have 2,000 square feet, and that physically won't be possible. The other thing I want to look at is how much dollars do I need to put into the renovation? Again, if I'm buying a 4-bedroom house and I want to maximize it by putting 8 bedrooms in, am I going to overspend my rehab budget to where it doesn't make sense anyways? So it has to be the right property, the right size, and it needs to be in the right condition that justifies the amount of renovation you need to put into it to maximize it. So these are all things you want to think about before buying that rooming house. In addition to, you want to think about how long the renovation strategy could take. In the case study we're going to talk about in a few minutes, it took us over 3 years to renovate this property. Now the reward and the upside was worth it, but we still had to cover the monthly holding costs and spend a ton of time, energy, and money on the renovation plan to get it to its highest and best use. Other things you want to look for is what's your geographical location. We purchase rooming houses in urban areas, highly densely populated, where there's a demand for housing. In addition to, we like to target urban areas because there's a high demand for affordable housing. Many times our rooming houses lease up extremely quickly because we're fully renovating a property, we're putting them in immaculate shape with all new amenities, and tenants are able to rent a room for just under $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month in the Seattle market is very affordable. Your typical 1-bedroom apartment is going to run you about $1,500 to $1,600 a month. So it allows people to save almost 50% on their rent by moving into a rooming house rather than an apartment. So in areas where there's a high demand for affordable housing, rooming houses work really well. Other areas we look for rooming houses in are areas next to colleges. College kids need places to stay. A lot of them don't want to stay in traditional fraternity houses, so rooming houses are a great second option. In addition to, they want to keep their expenses low, so a room of $800 to $900 a month is very affordable. They can go to college, they have a cheap place to stay, and the property's fully renovated so they feel good about staying there. The one thing you want to evaluate in college locations is times of lease up. It is fundamentally important that if you're buying a rooming house next to a college location, that you get it fully stabilized by the beginning of summer. Because if you miss the beginning of summer, you can miss all your potential tenants that are going to lease up in August and September. So when you're looking at a rooming house next to a college, it is very important that you hit your timelines and then you have it up for lease at the right time of the market. Other areas that we target are areas next to hospitals. A lot of times they have interns, they have college students that just graduated that are now working at these hospitals and they need affordable places to stay. These are great locations for rooming houses as well. So let's talk pros and cons of rooming houses. The pros, they cash flow higher than an apartment building. They appeal to the masses. They're affordable, they're nice, and they're in almost everybody's budget. And lastly, one of the best pros is you have a built-in target tenant base. We know if we're next to a college that we have built-in college students that have to have housing for a 12-month period. This ensures that we're gonna be able to lease this property and keep it stabilized. So let's talk about the cons of rooming houses. The first one is you have higher expenses. On our typical apartment building, we run 25% in expenses. On rooming houses, we pay more costs, so our expenses are at 35%. The second, you can have a little bit higher turnover. Because you're renting to individual people that are sometimes on more affordable payments, sometimes you can have a failure to pay and you have to move that specific person out. Another con of rooming houses is your tenants turn over a little bit faster. You have a shared house where sometimes personalities don't vibe right. These people don't know each other. They're living together. There can be conflict, and sometimes a tenant suddenly moves. That can create a gap in your cash flow. Another reason we run our expenses a little bit higher. Another negative of owning a rooming house is putting together the right renovation plan. When you're looking at these homes that are 3 to 4 bedroom and you want to maximize the total amount of rentable square footage, sometimes it is required that you put together a very complex construction plan. This can take time, it can take money, and it leads to dead time on your money, which affects your return. So make sure you're targeting the right type of property so the construction plan doesn't ruin your deal. And lastly, something that we learned very recently is during times of pandemic or crisis, rooming house demand can go down. Since the pandemic, our rooming houses have dropped about 30% in rent. Why? People don't really want to live in shared housing when there's a pandemic going on. Colleges weren't in session the whole time. So these things affected our rooming house portfolio, which is typically very high cash flow, and they dropped about 35% off of rent income. So times of crisis can cause issues with your high cash flow property. Another con is seasonal. When you're targeting rooming houses next to colleges or things that are in session, if you miss that time frame, you can miss your whole lease up market. We have done a rooming house before where we got it finished about a month too late and we missed all of the college students that had already found housing. When you're trying to rent a rooming house in the middle of a college town, it does cause some problems. A lot of people don't want to live in a neighborhood where maybe there's beer pong going on all the time. So it made it a little bit harder to rent up that property because the demand had fallen so much. So make sure you check your timelines and that they work inside your plan. So when targeting a rooming house or trying to find our next rooming house, typically we're targeting high urban, highly dense populated areas. We're looking for single family houses with large square footage. And we're making sure that the zoning allows for us to rent it out per room or up to 8 tenants per house. In addition to, we target large duplexes and triplexes because we can actually also rent out each individual unit with about 6 to 8 tenants per unit. Another type of property that we target are just large square footage multifamily properties. Things like a 4,000 square foot duplex where maybe it's 2,000 square feet per unit. We're able to take each one of these units, maximize the bedroom counts with about 8 bedrooms per unit, and get about 16 tenants in a duplex property. So when you find your next rooming house, how do you pay for it? It really depends on what kind of rooming house you found. If you found a potential one that already has 6 to 8 bedrooms in it, chances are you can get it financed with soft money if you're going to do some renovations on it, or even traditional financing. Typically go to your local banks because they're going to understand that specific asset better. Having a national lender look at a rooming house in a local market, sometimes they can throw the values off. How we finance every one of our rooming houses is actually with hard money. The reason being is because we're typically targeting value add, beat up old properties with large square footage. We like to get the best equity position and the highest cash flow by targeting these types of homes. They're typically because we can pay substantially less for them because we're getting such a big discount to market, we're able to finance a large renovation plan in there. Typically when we're going from like a 4-bedroom house to an 8-bedroom house, it's gonna cost us about $100 a square foot to renovate that property. So by using hard money, we're able to go to our lender, Interest Funding, who is a local lender in the Seattle market. They know what the rooming house product is. They're able to give us a construction loan for the right kind of plan going from a 4 to 8 bedroom house. And then we're able to finance all those repairs into our renovation loan. They finance us 85% of the new appraised value. This allows us to minimize the amount of cash we have in the deal and then refinance the property rate and term with a more local bank once the property is fully stabilized and rented out to individual tenants or students. When doing these large value add rooming houses, make sure you're working with your construction lender and you're setting up your budget correctly. Things you want to think about when renovating these large rooming houses is what's the code in your local city. Many times in the city of Seattle, they actually kick us from single family code into commercial code. We need to know that before we look at buying that next property on what they're going to require us to do. The reason it is so important is because they make you upgrade certain systems once you get put into commercial code. You must think about this before buying that next property. It can be very expensive to renovate and upgrade these buildings to commercial code. We have to do things like add sprinklers to the building. We need to retrofit the building and bolt it all down. There's commercial framing code, how we insulate the building. There's fire sprinkler monitoring. These are huge costs that can dramatically affect your return. So make sure you explore them, you perform them, and they work inside of your plan and your performa. So now that I've given you the rundown on rooming houses, I'm going to take you through a case study of the largest rooming house that we've ever completed in the Pacific Northwest. We converted a 22-unit rooming house into over a 40-unit rooming house in the primo neighborhood of Capitol Hill in Seattle, Washington. This specific neighborhood demands high rents, is one of the most expensive markets in all of Washington, and it had a high demand for affordable housing because people want to rent spaces for cheaper in the specific neighborhood. We identified this property off market, engaged with the seller, and we found out that it was an art house. He had it rented out to a bunch of artists that were kind of free living and kind of coming in and out as it went. The property was in terrible shape and all the mechanicals and systems were completely outdated. We purchased the property for $2.5 million off market. We had an anticipated renovation budget of $1.7 million. We lined up financing with interest funding to purchase the property with a construction loan where they financed us 85% of the total project cost. That required us to leave in $750,000 in the deal to purchase. We leased it to a nonprofit on our master lease with just one tenant. They pay us $54,000 a month. We then have 35% in expenses, which is $18,000 a month. We cover our debt cost of $19,000 a month, and that creates a cash flow position of $17,000 a month or a 28% cash on cash return. In addition to, we picked up over $1.5 million in equity after the property was fully stabilized and leased. This is a home run deal. We own a Class A building in a prime neighborhood of Seattle, Washington, that's cash flowing at a 28% cash on cash return, and we picked up over $1.5 million in equity once it was stabilized. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit the road and go check this thing out, and you guys can see what we rebuilt over a 3-year time. This property ate up tons of time, effort, mental space on us for 3 years, so we're excited to go show it to you. We wanted to take you guys to the property and show you what a 40-unit rooming house looks like. So originally when we bought this property, it was this old craftsman home. We actually wanted to keep the original charm of the property, so we played into this whole thing. We kept the original siding, we retrofitted in the windows, and we wanted to keep that charm. Now the inside was completely stripped down and rebuilt. Again, we maximized the square footage by taking the 10,000 square feet and adding the 40 bedrooms. Things that you have to think about when you're doing a project of this size, we had to take safety precautions. So when you're looking at renting with a nonprofit, you gotta figure out what they need and not need. We had installed a security fence, all new security systems to make sure the tenants felt safe and protected in the area. And these are all expenses that we kind of had to factor into our plan when going with a master lease. But we wanted to give you guys a good visual. So as you can see, what we did here is we retrofitted all the windows. This has all new systems and windows, but we maintained that original Capitol Hill charm. What the previous homeowner had done is they had this old craftsman home, and then he connected it with this giant brick apartment building. So he actually converted a house and he actually blended a house and apartment together. So you'll see the original craftsman structure, and then it tied into this brick facade squared box. So because we had these two architectural styles, we had to make sure that it was visually appealing, but it also fit in with the neighborhood. As renovators, it's really important for us that we're not changing the look and feel of the neighborhood. What my business partner came up with, which was this amazing idea. So to kind of take away the two-tone, we actually tried to emphasize this. We ended up having to re-tuck point all the brick, and we painted a mural on it. We wanted this building to feel positive. We wanted it to have good energy. It says, "For there is always light if you are only brave enough to see it." Then he actually came up with another amazing idea, which I was shocked by, is we were trying to figure out how to kind of bring the community all together. And so we had this amazing graffiti portrait painted on, which is just honestly, it's one of a kind. It looks so amazing. So as we went through, it wasn't just planning the renovation plan. We had to also think about the whole big picture. This is a huge project that we worked on for over 3 years. This took up a lot of time, a lot of resources, and we wanted to be a positive influence in the community. So we wanted to make sure that we tied it in with the theme of the community. Keeping the original craftsman and then playing into the brick turned out to be a killer design. So to summarize rooming houses, you don't need to buy this giant 40-unit rooming house to make money on it. We actually started with smaller projects. Our first one we bought was a single family house that was 3,200 square feet. We paid $380,000 for it. We put another $350,000 into the renovation, and then we stabilized it with 8 separate tenants. On this building, as we kept buying them, we kept perfecting our systems. Then we made the big jump to the 40 unit. But before buying this kind of big project, you make sure that you're familiar with the construction scope. If we didn't have a substantial renovation background, it could have cost us $3 million to renovate this whole property. Before we closed on it, we went through the proper feasibility. We wanted to make sure the neighborhood was okay with our game plan. We ran it through neighborhood review, that they were okay with the visuals that we were going to put on it. Then we dug into the construction code. We went and met with the city, talked to them about vacating the building and stabilizing it, making sure the city was on board. And we also met with our construction teams to find out what was the extra codes we were going to install. We probably had about an additional $350,000 in upgrades that we had to put in this building because we got upgraded to commercial code. So I hope everyone enjoyed this episode on BiggerPockets about how we broke down rooming houses. Remember, there's big ones and small ones. Find the one that works for you. Make sure you check out the geographical locations, the zoning works for you, and then you can get the financing lined up for it. If you enjoyed the information, make sure you click like and subscribe to BiggerPockets YouTube channel. And for more information on rooming houses and long-term wealth, check me out on Instagram at jdainflips or on YouTube at Project RE. See you next time.